Hello and welcome to the Goon Talk, back again with you guys for another show for our second episode of our TGT Top 5, which is basically where I give the reins over to the guys of our regulars and some others and want to get basically their top 5 of a subject of their choice, which is up for debate and discussion with you guys in the comment section. Yesterday, we had a chat with Lee Judges and we did Patrick Vieira's top 5 goals, and it was a really, really good chat and discussion. And some people in the chat disagreed, and some people thought it was a really, really good list. And there were some great conversations going on there. It was really nostalgic, to be fair, as well, talking about Patrick Vieira too, which is always nice. But today we're a little bit closer to modern day. However, we are covering quite a big time frame, as I'm joined by John. How you doing, mate?
Good, good. How are you holding up over there?
Yes, yeah. Yes, right. I went out for a bike ride today as my daily exercise, because we're allowed out for one bit of exercise.
Do they round you up? Hey, I think I saw you today already. And just throw you in the back of the van.
Like, oh, you've been out here already. You just
got to wear a wig. Wear a wig.
So yeah, I went out for a bike ride as my daily exercise. What about you? How's it? I know it's New York's the hub. So you're in Miami. How's Miami coping with things?
So it's not too bad right now. They have us where we can't go outside or anything like that. But the problem is that, like, while everyone was trying to figure out what to do, they had like spring break going on in like Miami and in Fort Lauderdale. So people were just like crowded, packed the beaches, and everyone had to like they dispersed. Like let's get real here. So so hopefully everything works out. But it's a rough situation.
Yeah, so stay indoors, take your one bit of exercise you're allowed, and ultimately film your videos inside. So, as we're doing now. In terms of what we picked for today, you have picked, rather, the top 5 Arsenal playmakers of the last decade. So from 2010 to 2019 is our selection parameters. I let John pick his 5, and I think we've come up with a decent list. I think there's going to be some discrepancies for sure with some people, but that's why we do it, and that's why we're hopefully going to get you guys involved. So let's start with our number 5, which is someone who we miss quite a lot at the moment, and maybe we'll let him go for nothing at all, and that is Aaron Ramsey. So Aaron Ramsey ended with 46 Premier League assists. Why have you put him in your 5, John?
So I think that he is one of our most creative players that we've had in the last 10 years. And it's not just his ability to create a play, but it was his engine. And that was something that he was like really, really well known for, was how much from start to end of a match that he'd be able to give it 100%. And, that was something we was always able to rely on him. And not only that, he gets a special mention, and it doesn't really have to do with his technicality, but this is a guy that suffered a career-ending injury and then came back from that and still put on performances to the point where, he broke our goal drought, or our trophy drought, and scored in 2 finals. So this is a guy that made things happen, and not just made things happen, but made them happen on a big stage and important moments in a time in his career that he probably shouldn't have come back from.
100%. I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people putting in their lists, and they're not seeing Ramsey in. I'm not seeing them in their list. I'm seeing Nasri in there. I'm seeing Arteta coming up as well.
Interesting.
And we're going to have to see if any of those make our list as we go through. We won't really reveal anything. But, I mean, in terms of Aaron Ramsey, he was just someone that he was an enigma, because when he wasn't in the team, people wished he was in the side. And then there was times where he was in the team, he would frustrate the hell out of so many people. He wouldn't really keep it simple in certain areas. In his earlier part of his career, he'd always try and play the pass that was too difficult, or try a fancy flick. And at the start, it used to frustrate the hell out of people, but he evolved effectively as a player, and he improved. And those fancy flicks and tricks and some of the key passes, eventually he honed those skills to a point where they were coming off more than they weren't. And that led to obviously interest from Juventus, and obviously the fact that he was running down his contract to the point where he wasn't going to have any years left. And then we lost him for free. And it's probably fair to say Arsenal have lacked something in that pivot midfield pairing ever since he left, and it's frustrating to see an Arsenal side without Aaron Ramsey in. And he's not had an amazing time in Italy, but he's been doing what he's been doing. He's been playing mostly at number 10 from when I've looked at things, in behind Cristiano Ronaldo and Dybala and the like. So I miss him a lot, but I think he has to go down as one of our real creative sparks, and partly, not partly, but massively so, goal scoring. I mean, Omar says that Ramsey was a big game player, and he definitely
absolutely.
I mean, the goal he scored against Spurs in his final season.
Galatasaray, how about in the Champions League? That goal from, I don't know. I've never seen
Norwich as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that Norwich volley was amazing. So there's so much that Aaron Ramsey gave. And when we're thinking about it, we should probably caveat this, John, before we go into number 4. What would you actually define as a playmaker?
Okay, so I think there's different ways of looking at what a playmaker is. You have your kind of standard number 10, which obviously would be like your Mesut Ozil, but I don't think that that's the only characteristic of a playmaker. I think we try to categorize certain areas of the pitch far too black and white, and I think that there's a little bit more fluidity in it. And there's different playmaking aspects of all the positions on the pitch, even in defense. When you're talking about someone like Luiz playing out of the back, and trying to ping balls all up to the wings from the defensive line. That's a playmaking aspect of his game. And, while he might not be a playmaker, there's certain things that players do that can affect the game in a way that you really need to have them in this conversation, even though that's not their main role. And a perfect example of that is someone like Henry, and we'll maybe get to that at some point. But, he's a striker. Or I'm not going to ruin anything, but I think that's something to have a conversation about as well. So there isn't a black and white definition for, in my opinion, what constitutes a playmaker. I think that you have your, like I said, standard ones, like your number 10s, but you also have like your creative attacking midfielders. You have your box-to-box players who are just as well making plays, bringing balls from defense and making sure that the attack is actually flowing forward towards the opposition net. And that's what Ramsey did really well, especially with, like I said, his engine that he had and his ability to do it in big games and in big moments.
100%. So it's not just your basic creator, it's also someone that makes the game happen effectively and keeps the game ticking over, and also chips in with some really, really big game moments and goals.
Yeah.
So, and Mr. J in the chat said his top 5, and it includes Bergkamp. Now, we have caveated this by saying that it is the last decade. So 2010 to 2019 is your parameters that we've got. So moving on to our number 4 then is the one who actually, ironically, has the most assists in the Premier League on our list, and that is Mr. CESC Fabregas. So the Spaniard ended his Premier League career after leaving Chelsea, moving to Monaco, with 111 assists, with a lot of those, of course, being in the red and white of Arsenal. Why is he not further up on your list is what I would ask.
I think he arguably should be further up, but I did not put him further up the list just because of the time frame that we were dealing with within a decade and the period and how he was playing with us at the end part of that decade. So when you're looking at this at his contributions within the decade, there were some great moments for him, but it was a little bit low towards like the decline of CESC at Arsenal. So that's the kind of the framework I looked at him and his contribution in terms of a playmaker to Arsenal. He was injured for a lot of his last seasons, and he just had a great interview where he was talking about like the regrets that he had, and one of them was that RVP was injured as well, and the second he left and went to Barcelona, RVP what he did in the Premier League. So he was kind of regretting that. And I feel like there's a lot of question marks or asterisks about how he performed for us within the decade of the time frame that we're talking about. So arguably, he's one of the greatest playmakers, and there's an argument for being the greatest playmaker in the Premier League era, in the modern era, Premier League era. So he probably should be higher up the list, but like I said, just because we were dealing with 10 years there, I put him a little bit lower because there were players that have played more often than he did within that time frame that had done more.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree on that one. I think that, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it, but Arsblog interviewed CESC Fabregas. And if you haven't had a chance, people, to check that out, please go and give it a listen. It's really interesting.
It's great.
And one of the really interesting things towards the end of it was when he was talking about how he thought that only Nasri maybe was the player on his level. And that's one of the reasons why he left the club. And at the time, I think something like when a player leaves, at the time, people sort of think of it as, oh, he's a traitor, he's a snake, he's leaving. But if you actually listen to the interview, he talks about how he basically spoke to Arsene Wenger and Arsenal about transfers. We could have signed Xabi Alonso, who could have been on this list easily had he signed.
Easily would have been on this list.
And we could have gone for him, and we didn't, and he was desperate to come, and that would frustrate the hell out of you as a top player. If you want other top players to come to your team, it's possible for it to happen, and they don't, it's going to frustrate you. And then when he left Barcelona, he put in his contract. He was the one that put the buyback option, the first, not the buyback, but the first call sort of option in his contract. And Arsenal waited the whole week that they had to contact him about it, and they'd never contacted him. And it's quite disrespectful in Arsenal's sense. And maybe some people might turn around and say that you're basically like criticising Arsenal and this is a player that left us. But you've got to look at this from a neutral perspective as well, and you can't let bias take from it. But he moved to Chelsea because he loves London, and he didn't want to go to Manchester, basically, is another one. But I think that in terms of looking at it as a creator and as a playmaker, he made so many things happen on a pitch for Arsenal. And without him, we wouldn't have achieved some of the things that we did. And arguably, we might not have even been in those Champions League spots for as many seasons as we were without him in that side. Going to number 3, and this is someone I've seen in the chat box that said they would put at number 1, and that is Alexis Sanchez. Alexis Sanchez, of course, now at Inter Milan, struggling slightly after leaving the Arsenal, going to Manchester United. Tucky said, just my opinion, but if we're talking about making things happen, Alexis is my clear number 1. So why have you put him at number 3, John?
Okay, this one is another one that I struggle with because I completely agree that a lot of these players could be considered number 1, but only one of them can. And Alexis Sanchez was one of the sparks that we've had in the last decade that I think he was probably one of the most, next to Aubameyang, exciting players to watch for Arsenal in the last decade. And I think that's not a very controversial statement. I mean, we all remember how he played. We all remember the impact that he made and how he would try to get things done. Whether or not he was a good person to have in the locker room and stuff like that, that's a different story. But this was a guy that not only just made things done, got things done, but like it's hard to explain. You watched him, you saw him and the things that he would do. And he would make it by himself out of nothing. And he was a little bit predictable in terms of what he would do. You know, like he would always favor one foot and he would always kind of make that turn and things like that. But he was so hungry all the time, and he was such an exciting player. And that kind of a player, I think we had not seen at Arsenal in a long time. And that comment that just came up on the screen now about how he had a winning mentality and the players a week, I mean, that's an argument. I think that there are two sides to that, and that's a conversation for a whole nother day maybe. But you know, there's one thing when you have a winning mentality and another one where you don't care whether you win or lose as long as you score, and that's not really a winning mentality. That's kind of a selfish mentality. But I want to keep this positive because Alexis Sanchez is an incredible player, and I think that he was such a good playmaker for us, and it was one of these kind of attacking players that, you know, he would, like I said, make something happen out of nothing. And the one that keeps coming to my mind is just in the FA Cup, that goal that he scored like right outside the box. It was just fantastic goal, and it was at Wembley in the final. It was audacious. And sorry, my puppy agrees. You know, he wants Alexis higher on the list as well, possibly. Look, I love Alexis Sanchez. I loved him when he was at the club. I'm happy that he did not do well at United, and you know what? That's what happens. But what a player he was, and it was at a time where we didn't really have a lot to get excited about so much. You know, we had just come off of a FA Cup win a little bit before, and it was in the summer right after the World Cup. So there was kind of that buzzing going on. He had a great performance, and he came in and right away from his first game, you saw, wow, okay, this guy is really going to put the fire on the pitch. And then that's what happened throughout his whole career here. So you could talk about his mentality and how he acted in the dressing room all you want. But when he was on the pitch and he was doing his thing, I'm thinking about that Man United goal, that little flick that we destroyed them at the Emirates. I mean, look, that's the kind of player he was. And I think that the stats speak well for him as a creative player, as an attacking player. And if you ever watched him, you know that that's exactly what he brought to the table.
100%. There's not too much more I can add to that. I think that he was just someone that transformed Arsenal's left-hand side as soon as he signed. That desperate need to drive the ball forwards and make things happen really did give us that edge, and built on our FA Cup success this season that we signed Mesut Ozil, and led us then to a couple more in those seasons beyond that. So he was very, very key to that. The goal he scored against Manchester City in the semi-final, I think, is just typical of him desperate to get to the ball, desperate to finish things off. And he created so many things as well, 31 assists in the Premier League in his time in England. So he has definitely got to be on the list. Some people would say he has to be higher. Some people would argue that maybe the playmaker tag is not the correct one. But I think that because of how much he did make and do for Arsenal, he has to be on this list somewhere. Before we go on to number 2 and 1, I'm going to talk about some honourable mentions, because as soon as we reveal number 2, everyone will know who number 1 is. So we said we didn't put Nasri on this list because I
purposely didn't put Nasri on this list.
We felt that we just couldn't. Well, I agreed with you. I can't put him on a list. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will say that is childish and petulant.
Yes, it is.
I'd argue that these players that we've selected on this list still eclipse him in terms of what he gave to Arsenal.
I think so.
In a playmaker way as well. So that's that. Some of the red herrings on there. You said Olivier Giroud is an interesting one.
I did. So I think that's going to be a controversial one, but and really it goes back, which is why we prefaced by how we're defining a playmaker. I think there are playmaking aspects to almost every role on the pitch, and just because someone's not defined as a playmaker doesn't mean that you can't assess their playmaking capabilities and how they contributed from a playmaking standpoint with the on the pitch. And Olivier Giroud, people call him like a lamppost and that he's just a target man, but that's really disingenuous. I mean, he was a player that defenders had to deal with 100%, and he allowed the play to move forward because he would drag defenders out of position. You had to mark him because if a cross came in, he's going to probably get on the end of it. He's going to put his big meaty front forehead on it and put it in the back of the net. So it was a player that had to be dealt with, and it allowed other players to move around him. Not only that, I mean, you could talk about his little flicks that he did in the box, and he wasn't just a target man. And I think that it might be a little controversial and weird to put him on a playmaker list, but I think he deserves at least an honorable mention there, because at least in the last 10 years, he was crucial to our attack for a good portion of the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't put him on the list because playmaking was that's not what he was there for.
Exactly. He's not a playmaker.
He's not a playmaker. That's not. But the reason why we put him on, sort of mentioned him, because I think it does go unsaid about what he did in terms of the creativity and holding the ball up, leading players on. Some of the other players, someone who's not on this list that I wish was on this list for me is Thomas Rosicky.
Yep.
The Czech Republic international was one of my, if not, I think possibly my favourite player growing up and watching. That makes people feel really old that I say growing up and watching Thomas Rosicky play, but genuinely when he signed from Borussia Dortmund, it was sort of one of those that came out a little bit of left field, and I wish he just didn't have the injury issues that he had have done, because had he have been able to stay fit for all that time, he would have been an unbelievable midfielder for us, and an amazing playmaker. In the chat box, people are saying, Giroud, are you having a laugh? Is what they're saying in the chat.
I knew it was going to be controversial, and I knew people would not get it. Just to be clear, he's not a playmaker, and I don't think he's a playmaker. But, I mean, he does dictate play for us and has for a while. And that doesn't mean, just because he's gone on a goal drought, doesn't mean that he still hasn't helped make plays. Mesut Ozil doesn't score and he helps play. Sometimes Alexis Sanchez doesn't score and he'll dictate play. So being a playmaker doesn't mean scoring necessarily.
Nathaniel James reckons that Alex Song definitely deserves a mention for some of the balls that he played over top for RVP to finish all of the time, for sure. I do want to just sort of caveat this, because people are saying...
I really don't. I think we pretty much said it 3 times.
I know. We are not saying that Giroud is a playmaker. We're saying,
no, he's not.
I don't think we can emphasize that. Mention in terms of some of the playmaking qualities that he had within his game. So don't worry, we're not calling Giroud a playmaker. All right,
so just, I guess for the 4th time, Giroud is not a playmaker.
Yeah, okay. So I hope that settles what people think about that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our number 2. Now, I personally disagree with you on this.
That's fine.
I would swap these 2.
I had it the way you did at first, and there's one reason why I didn't, and I'll explain it. So, but I had it the way that you did it originally.
This is your video, your list. So number 2, and more controversy is.
There we go.
who would I have at number one personally? But why is Santi Cazorla not at the top of your list? I want to see the negative side of it and then talk about him as what he was.
I can't really explain why Santi's not at the top of the list without talking about who's at the top, unfortunately. But I will say that Santi Cazorla absolutely deserves to be at the top of this list in many regards. I mean, he is probably the most technically gifted player that we've had in the last decade. And the ability he had on not just his right foot, his left foot, and the versatility he had. I mean, I feel like you could play him anywhere in the attack, maybe except center forward, just because of his height and stature. But the guy was impossible to take the ball from. And when you have a system like Wenger had, where possession was key and forward, flowing football was paramount, being able to keep the ball and to artfully move it with both feet, it was absolutely necessary. And he did it better than anyone on the pitch, and he did it for a long time. And had he stayed healthy with Coquelin that one season, I think that would have been our go-to midfield partnership going forward. It was, I think, the biggest issue that we had going into a situation where we could have won the league and we didn't. And I think that was the biggest part of it, was when he got injured. And it was clear that when that season that we lost Santi, that we lost something extremely important in how we tried to progress the ball and in this working partnership that was developing. So that was a big one. And I mean, he's just an incredible player. He's probably up there with the most technically gifted Arsenal player of all time. He's up there with like Bergkamp and stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. So number one on your list is Mesut Ozil. I'll leave my sort of
yeah, and look, everyone could not listen if they want, but this is just my thought. But and it might be just because of my German bias. But look, I think that he's had recent unfortunate for a while. I would say a good 3-4 years probably. He's having a difficult time. But I'm thinking back to when we first signed him and the first couple seasons he gave us. And okay. So someone just said, who also said he was going to stop listening, that Ozil.
Focus on the comments.
Ozil hasn't created anything since he signed a new contract. You're dreaming, bro. All right. So the caveat is, yes, he hasn't, since he signed his new contract, he hasn't been, he hasn't been doing very well. But that's I'm trying to take a bigger look at this. Like, it's a very myopic view of it. I'm trying to look at what his impact was when he came here and how he performed when he first came up to this club. He was absolutely, he changed the dynamic of what Arsenal Football Club was. And, we were leaking, we were bleeding high-class players that were leaving the club in droves. Looked like we had no direction going forward. We were making panic signings. It was absolutely stagnant, it looked like. And then Mesut Ozil came in, and all of a sudden now we had hope. We had changed this play style. He came in from La Liga. He was, electrifying when he first came. People forget that just because he's been so poor recently. But the guy changed the direction of Arsenal Football Club. And in terms of the stature that he had when he signed us, and that we could make a deal like that. And I think that, you look at your Alexises, you look at your Aubameyangs and stuff like that. I don't think that we get to that point without Ozil agreeing to join Arsenal when he did. And look, the guy, he is one of the greatest playmakers in Europe, and not anymore, but he was. And that was including times that he was at Arsenal when he almost broke Thierry Henry's record, but for that other fan favorite on this list, Giroud, who couldn't finish that season. But look, I get why Santi could be number one, but for me, just given the stature of Ozil when he came here and what he was doing and what we were doing at the time, he has to be number one for me in the last decade at least. I get it that recently he hasn't done it, and that's a good argument. I think it is that he hasn't done very much, but then arguably as Santi was aging, he didn't do that much either when he got injured and things like that. And Ozil has, since Santi left, done more than Santi has in recent times, even though he hasn't been very involved very well. So look, I get it. You don't have to be blind. You don't have to be blind, I'm sorry. It doesn't take like a genius to see that he hasn't done well for us. So that's kind of
it's very hard to talk about Mesut Ozil without seeing like people's view of him being so negative, because it's I get for people that it's incredibly frustrating seeing a player that's on a lot of money in the last couple of years, 3 years, and hasn't done as much as maybe you should have done. But that's not what we're doing on this list whatsoever. This list is about looking at the playmaking qualities of someone.
Yes.
And what we have seen in the decade is we have seen what was the best number 10 at the time from Real Madrid join Arsenal, transfer those skills during those 2 seasons, take Arsenal from a 9-year trophy drought, winning an FA Cup, in which he was instrumental in doing that. Yep. He became an incredible creative force for Arsenal. And yes, I'm not saying you should completely ignore the years that he had like a poor run in the last few years. What I'm saying is that you have to isolate and close analysis on the years that he did do well on, and that's why he's so high up on this list. So I think when you're talking about Ozil, yes, you can have your criticism of him, but the whole point of the list is to look at things of what they've done during the decade and what they have done. And what Ozil did was, for me, take us from a 9-year trophy drought, and he turned us into a side that won a trophy again. And
one really quick, one thing, just to talk, like, forget about that for a moment, which is absolutely pivotal. And I think the key point here, he technically, in terms of his ability as a footballer, putting aside all the other stuff, his ability as a footballer, he is an absolute incredible footballer. And if you don't see that, and I see why now, maybe because he's older, there's a lot of crap going on in his life. You look at what happened in the World Cup recently, with all of that. And I get there was a lot of corollary things going on in his life that affected the way he was playing, maybe a little bit of lethargy and not really caring as much as he used to. I don't really know exactly what was going on behind the scenes, so I'm not going to speculate to that. What I do know is that when he was here and he was doing well, he was absolutely fantastic. And he was in Spain, and he was when he came here. And to anyone who can't see that, I really don't know what to tell them. I really don't, because I think that the argument's gone back and forth a million times. And I know Mesut Ozil being the one on this list really is going to upset some people, but I don't really care, because I think that at the end of the day, I know what I saw with this player. And when he came here, he changed the way that we play football, and he changed the way that we viewed where this club was moving. And I don't think that's something that anyone could take away. And no one, I think, on that list had been able to do that, but Ozil. The impact on the trajectory of this club. And some people can say that it went in a poor direction, but I mean, look, we won 2. He ended our trophy drought, like you said. So I don't really think that's a valid argument, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's comments in the chat about saying that, yeah, we understand that it's about consistency, but that's not what this list is about.
It's not who's the most consistent playmaker. It's
not about that. It's who has the greatest playmaking ability, and on this list, it is between Santi Cazorla and Mesut Ozil. And to say that Mesut Ozil is not either first or second on this list in terms of playmaking ability, you are, I don't know what you've been watching, but Mesut Ozil has to be up there on this list for his playmaking ability. I wish it was way more consistent, and that's why it's so frustrating.
Yes.
But in terms of ability and the playmaking qualities that he has to be either 1 or 2 on this list. And whilst I think me and John disagree on where it goes in terms of 1 and 2, we both appreciate what Mesut Ozil did. So sometimes you just need to put your anger aside and learn to appreciate.
Look, I'm right there with everyone that I think that.
Of course, am I.
I'll even go as far as to say that I think that he probably should not have signed that contract. I think he should have moved on. And I think that this conversation would have been a lot easier. But the fact that he was here and he hasn't been doing as well recently, I think definitely puts a shadow over what he's done for us in the past, which is why I started this off by saying, let's remember what he did when he first came here and those first couple seasons that he had with us.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, on the list, Beat said no one is denying Ozil was the most talent on this list by far. No one comes close, but consistency is what we're saying. Yeah, and that's the point, is that you've said it there, that no one is denying that Ozil has the most talent on this list. Well, he has the most talent on this list by far, as you say, and therefore that is why he is up there, because
correct.
He has the most talent. He has the most ability. That's why
I know. Yeah, and I think it's a weird look. Football it's an emotional thing, and I think that you have your ideas of certain players, and they're inextricable from you can't remove them. They're immutable positions that people have, and I think most people are like done with Ozil for the most part. And when you're actually looking at it, like, you can make all these little arguments about him not being consistent or how bad he's done recently, but when you look at the talent of this player in this last decade, that we've had in a playmaking role. I mean, come on. It's a no-brainer in my opinion.
Yeah, and I saw an interesting comment from Peter saying at Real he had players around him doing all the donkey work. That's so far wide of the mark, because if you watch La Liga, during those years, and if you actually listen to some of the interviews like Cristiano Ronaldo did, Ronaldo was fuming that when Ozil left, absolutely fuming when Real Madrid sold him and signed Gareth Bale, because Ozil had quality players around him that he enabled and made better, and he created so many more chances. And after Ozil left and they signed Gareth Bale, that creative spark and that creative energy was then left carrying Benzema, who basically turned from what was a classic number 9 into sort of a second, not a second striker, but like a false 9, in which Ronaldo would be the main goal scorer, playing wide yet coming centrally, and Benzema's role basically became enabling Cristiano Ronaldo. And so that's why you saw those comments. And B says, Omar says, do you think Ronaldo is still fuming 4 Champions Leagues later? No, of course not. Of course he's not fuming 4 Champions Leagues later, but that's not the point we're saying. Not whatsoever. Okay, so let's round things off there then. I think this has been a very, very good video. One, because it's incited a lot of discussion, which I really, really like to see.
Yeah.
I love that most people have been respectable. Some people haven't, and I'll just be getting them a little block.
Hey, look, it's okay. Look, like I said, football is an emotional thing, and people get very attached to certain things and their views, and they want to say it as loud as they can. But just because you say it loud doesn't mean that you're right. Let's put it that way. Of
course, and it's all about opinions at the end of the day, and everyone's entitled to one, as long as you're putting across in a respectful way. Good stuff. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, people. Make sure you drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed the discussion, and maybe even if you haven't, but you've enjoyed talking about it and getting your thoughts in our chat box as well. Tomorrow, there should be another one if Drew is awake. But we've got a good one with Drew coming up as well, so make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss when we go live on that one. And of course, please hit the like button and follow John on Twitter at 305cast, and follow us at the Gooner Talk TV. We will see you again very, very soon, and as always, up the Arsenal.